Okay, picking up on chapter 1 about eating and food rules. And last time we talked about, I forget, just the basics of why it's important not to intervene, why mediating between somebody, a kid, and what they eat is a confusion, and it's a fundamental basic one. We're talking about eating, and I wrapped up with what would I do if my kid was overweight. And so now I'm going to pick up on, this is maybe the most controversial sentence in the whole book. All right. The truth is that, let's see, this is chapter 1. I'm on page 19. All right, the bottom. The truth is that there is a lot of time to wait and see if a pattern of eating is causing a problem. And so that's what I was saying, that so much of rules for kids is about guessing that a certain thing will cause a certain problem, rather than simply waiting to see if that problem arises. And if that problem doesn't arise, then you have spared yourself and your kid the foul for all the problems with enforcing rules. And so I'm a major advocate of simply waiting for a problem to arise. And with eating, it takes a long time for eating a problematic way to actually produce a problem. And so here's my example. My 5-year-old son has been eating ice cream almost exclusively for the past few months. And if anything, he's on the thin side. Before ice cream, his staple was Oreo cookies, but he seems to have grown tired of them. He eats ice cream as a meal, and he goes many hours between servings, not because we limit him, but presumably because he only likes to eat a limited amount at a time. Over the course of a day, he consumes a typical amount of calories. Contrary to popular opinion, free reign simply does not guarantee excessive eating of sweets or any other kind of food. So yes, it's funny that this paragraph doesn't sound so crazy to me, because I'm saying, my point was that he's got unfettered access to ice cream. Yes, he does eat a lot of ice cream, right? I'm not painting a picture of, I don't know, an unrealistic picture. I'm saying that, a kid can eat almost exclusively ice cream for months and do totally fine. Not become overweight, not eat in some scary pattern, but simply eat mainly ice cream in moderation, right? He didn't have to learn how to control himself around ice cream. It doesn't even make any sense, because ice cream has just never been a problem for him. It's never been introduced as a problem. It's never been presented as a problem. We've never made him afraid of ice cream. We've never made him feel like he's some sort of degenerate if he likes ice cream. I never made him, feel like there's some magical power that's going to descend on him if he eats too much of it. That has just never been part of his world. And so, surprisingly or not, he moderates his ice cream intake. I think what freaked people out is that it's exclusively ice cream, but still, ice cream is eggs. We buy high quality ice cream because it tastes good. It's eggs, milk, and sugar, pretty much. That's it. I mean, eggs are great, milk is great, and sugar, okay. And I don't want to get too much into nutrition here, but if eggs are great and milk is great, and sugar is the real problem with ice cream, well, I mean, what do you think? I don't know. Kids eat bread, they eat rice, they eat cereal, they eat all sorts of. I mean, most normal kid food is simple carbohydrates, and simple carbohydrates turn into the equivalent of sugar after mere minutes in the stomach and the digestive tract. So, eating almost exclusively eggs, milk, and sugar, but doing so in moderation, I don't think is such a crazy thing. And if he's not getting overweight, if he doesn't seem malnourished, if he seems like a healthy boy, if he goes to the pediatrician and the pediatrician doesn't raise any concerns, this is not a problem. This is him learning about ice cream. And that phase did pass, but he is a very restrictive eater. And this is very common. I don't know how much experience people have with kids, maybe not all that much, but lots of kids are very, very picky eaters. And the official line for most pediatricians is not to worry about it, not to make a big deal out of it, not to give the kid an added problem of their parents freaking out about what they eat. Right? Parental anxiety about your eating is also a problem, right? Overweight being a problem, let's say. So is your parents freaking out about everything that goes in your mouth. How about kids getting defensive about what their parents want them to eat? How about all the family fights and squabbles that happen around food, right? All that stuff is bad as well. All right. And then the Oreo cookies, that also drove people crazy because, okay, ice cream may be actually natural food, right? It might be like a whole food, right? But Oreo cookies, that's right out. That's seed oils, that's palm oil, that's highly processed, a nightmare. Well, I don't think he's had an Oreo cookie in months. The Oreo cookie phase, again, it came and went, and at least he has zero hangups about food. I don't see any physical deficit that he has at all. I think he appears to his pediatrician, as I said, in the prime of health. I would challenge anybody to identify what's wrong. Of course, there are many people with conspiracy theories or crazy theories about food, but right, that's the range of crazy theories about the dangers and poisons of processed food goes on for there's how many different influencers are out there telling us about what's wrong with this or that dye, this or that macronutrient, this or that type of oil, etc. Where does it stop? So if you want to wade through all that stuff, I think that's a very difficult thing to make any. What am I saying? The number of fad diets and the amount of alarmism about this or that component of food the number is so extraordinarily high that it's very difficult to select. How are you selecting one of those theories and running with it? What is your basis of that? Are you a nutritionist? Are you studying human metabolism? And if so, how do you know that whatever outcomes you're seeing about this or that diet are not also a feature of a kind of person who eats this or that diet, right? A person who can do a paleo diet is a certain kind of person. That person tends not to be a big smoker. They tend to be pretty active. They tend to like to do things like rock climbing and triathlons and crap, right? They care about what goes into their body. They probably wear a seatbelt, right? A person who eats a paleo diet is a different kind of person than a person who eats Cheetos. That doesn't mean that it's the Cheetos that's causing the health deficits for the person who eats Cheetos. It might be the fact that they're more likely to smoke. They're likely to be have lower income. Lower income translates to all sorts of bad health outcomes. So it's probably not the Cheetos. Anyway, leaving that aside, I have to go on my nutrition rant some other time. All right, back to the book. Giving him free rein, he has learned how to feed himself. He gets the ice cream out of the freezer that sits below our fridge and spoons out his own serving. Everything about the food that he eats is mediated by him, uncomplicated by judgment, expectations, or rules. Nice thing about junk food is kids can feed themselves. If my kid did start to become overweight, I'm not sure I would do anything about it, out of fear that he would think that I disapprove of how he eats. Tension with meals and snacks add up over time, and there's no guarantee that it would be worthwhile. I've seen parents nag their overweight kids to no discernible effect except misery and humiliation. Instead of doing something, I'd wait until the kid himself expressed dissatisfaction with his weight. Once my kid identified that he had a weight problem by his lights and made it clear that my support was welcome, only then would I help him problem solve by exploring the problem situation itself and guessing possible solutions. Every step of the way, I would take extra care to make it clear that I'm only here to help him manage his weight and eating issues the way that he wants. That freaked a lot of people out. I don't have much else to say about that. It's not like someone who has a problem with eating, it's not a simple issue to solve. You don't simply just step in and tell them how to live their life. That even for kids, it just doesn't work. You cannot just tell someone how to live their life. You cannot just force somebody to eat the right way and avoid all of the negative consequences that come with that. The foul four. There's no way to avoid those things. So any intervention into controlling somebody will bring along the collateral issues that I spoke about. All right. What about bad eating habits? What about addictions to foods designed to hook us to their sugary and fatty ingredients that evolution did not equip us to handle? There are several reasons why this is not a good argument for restricting food. First, as I said before, there is the usual risk of backfire. Forbidden foods become extra tempting, right? That's the problem, right? There's a difference between wanting a person to do a certain thing, right, achieving a certain outcome, and the process by which you get them to do a certain thing, right? I could hold a gun to my kid's head and force them to eat vegetables, right? Most people would identify that as a bad idea because the holding of the gun to the head is a disaster. Even if they eat well and are physically healthy, the fact that they live with someone who regularly pulls out a firearm eliminates, compensates, negates probably all of the benefits. The health benefits that come from eating right are eliminated are negated by threatening with a gun. And that's an extreme example, but it illustrates the point that the threats, the coercion, the force bring harms that I think outweigh the benefits of whatever the achieved outcome is. So the process matters. That's what this book is about. This book is saying that the process of sovereignty is worth it. It's a lot of work in certain circumstances. There's lots of things that can go wrong, but it's a better process than coercion. Okay. Second, rules confuse kids about how food works. So I'm basically anticipating the foul four in this chapter. So this will sound redundant because I started these videos from the foul four and then moved on to the specific issues. Okay. Rules confuse kids about how foods work. For instance, eating unlimited lollipops can teach you that doing so is kind of gross. It makes your tongue raw, your mouth sore, and your stomach upset. My kids have access to practically infinite lollipops, and they rarely finish even one. They are ages 3 to 6, and they basically see lollipops the way I do. Tasty at first, but not worth it after 10 or 20 licks. But if I limited their lollipop consumption, they could never discover any of this. Damn. Building on this, I have a picture of my daughter. I can't remember if I've described it here. I have a picture of my daughter. I bought a bag of lollipops one day because I like them, and I took them home, and it was like a feeding frenzy. Like they wanted a lollipop, they wanted another one, they wanted another one. They weren't even finishing them. They were just like taking one, wrapping it, unwrapping it, licking it, and then they wanted a different one, tried a different flavor. And so I was this like, even just handing them out I was kind of gatekeeping them. So I just ripped the bag open and dumped them on the floor. A whole bag of lollipops. The 2 older kids got bored and moved on pretty quickly, but the 3-year-old at the time, she went and opened like 20 lollipops, and I got her a little bowl, and she would lick them and then put it in the bowl, and open another one, lick it, and put it in the bowl. And she was like sampling all the different flavors. And eventually she had a bowl of 20 licked lollipops, and I have a photo of it. It's almost like I should bring it up. Let me see if I can do it. No, I can't. Search function didn't work. That's sad. Anyway, she had a bowl of 20 licked lollipops, and then she was done. And she left the bowl there. And then to prove a point, I kept the bowl of lollipops on the counter. It was there for a couple days. Yeah. So again, this doesn't prove that kids won't overeat lollipops, right? I'm not using my kids as an example. I should have made this explicit as well. I'm not using my kids as anecdotes that prove that my system works. I'm using my kids to show, number one, that I'm serious about what I'm talking about. I'm not just pulling this out of thin air, that I have tried these ideas out. And number two, if they work for my kids, it doesn't prove that it will work for everybody else, but it does prove that it's possible, right? One case of a kid not overeating junk food does prove that it is possible that kids in the presence of unfettered access to junk food might not overeat. Lots of people tell me that they definitely will. Kids that can have unfettered access will spend all the time on the iPad. They'll spend all the time eating ice cream and blah, blah, blah. And so I just offer my kids as proof that that's not necessarily true. Yes, it might happen, but it's not guaranteed to happen. Okay. Building on this, if I limited their lollipop consumption, they could never discover any of this, the grossness of eating a bunch of lollipops. Building on this, the third reason is that avoiding or overcoming bad habits requires understanding, not mandatory avoidance. I'll read that again. The third reason that, several reasons for this, third reason why, we're talking about what about addictions to foods that are designed to hook us to their sugary and fatty ingredients, right? And so I'm saying that that's not a good argument. The argument that certain foods are dangerous, addictive, that we evolved in circumstances without abundant fats and sugars and salts, and that therefore we are vulnerable and helpless in the face of these compelling, tempting foods that are sugary, fatty, and salty with lots of powerful flavors. I'm saying that avoiding or overcoming bad habits requires understanding, not mandatory avoidance. For example, to avoid overeating cookies, you have to understand that cookies can be delightful with tea after dinner, but they don't satisfy hunger enough to substitute for a real meal. To discover this about cookies, you need to try them out. So basically cookies, I don't overeat cookies because I only like one or two cookies, and particularly I like cookies with tea or maybe coffee, right? I almost never eat a cookie just on its own. I have my preferences about cookies that I've discovered because I've had time to experiment with cookies. I've overeaten cookies. I've tried all sorts of different types of cookies, et cetera, et cetera. I've developed a robust understanding of cookies, and I am, I would say, immune. I am immune to their addictive potential. Even though my species has not evolved in the presence of foods like cookies, I am nonetheless able to regulate myself. It's not even regulating because I'm not struggling with myself. I simply don't like cookies in the absence of tea. I don't like cookies straight up. But to have that understanding is what guards against overeating cookies. And to have that understanding, I have to have freedom in the presence of cookies. So that's what we want. In all of these cases, we want freedom. We don't want freedom as a process for achieving understanding, and then understanding as a process of dealing with the world. That's the parenting job. The parenting job is to develop the understanding so that the kid can be independent, skillful, competent, can manage themselves in the world. How do they achieve the understanding? They need a freedom to learn about the world, and that means freedom to engage with cookies. And you want them to do that with a trusted parent who can say, you know what, maybe we're eating too many cookies. What do you think? Right? You would have to have extreme trust in order for that kind of a thought to land with a kid. If you're controlling a kid's access to cookies, suggesting to them that maybe they're eating too many cookies is just going to fall on deaf ears, as they say. Okay, let's see how we're doing here. 19 minutes, almost 20 minutes. I've just done 1.5 pages. Moreover, because I am not a gatekeeper or an adversary with my kids, they are open to my suggestions about food. They don't think I'm trying to manipulate them when I tell them that I don't find cookies to be filling. My kids often take my insights seriously and change their eating choices accordingly. For instance, they tend to trust my suggestions that they eat more in preparation for a long car ride, or that they finish a serving of yogurt that would otherwise spoil. Since these requests are tethered to the reality of food and are not some arbitrary set of rules, and since my kids always have the option to refuse, they build up my kids' understanding rather than block it. So if we're going on a long car ride, I'll say to them, hey, what do you think about eating an extra serving of whatever they're eating, right? If they eat half the hamburger, I'll say, hey, what do you think about eating the rest of the hamburger? We're going to be in the car for a while. I don't want you to get hungry, right? That's a completely valid, reasonable suggestion. I would make the same suggestion to my wife, right? I say, hey, don't forget, we're going to be a long car ride. I'm going to eat extra to just make sure I don't get hungry. As long as I take no for an answer. If they say, no, I don't want to eat the rest of the hamburger, fine. I put some extra snacks in the car, and we have extra food in case they get hungry in the car. It's not that hard to do. And by accepting their refusal, again, I'm establishing, building, maintaining trust. And when I make suggestions like that, my kids follow suit. They very often do what I ask. Yeah, if they've had half the cup of yogurt and the yogurt's going to spoil, and I say, hey, what do you think about eating the rest of the yogurt? Otherwise, it's going to go bad. They'll often do it. It's amazing. Lastly, it is inevitable that kids will encounter cheap processed food. Is it really better to shelter them from it, allowing just a few indulgences merely to delay the inevitable? Is a sudden exposure to the full range of junk food in their late teens a good way to teach restraint? I mean, they're going to have unfettered access eventually. What is the best way to prepare them for that, right? Is policing them, I mean, how does policing them work, right? To say it's, how many cookies is too many cookies? And the simple fact of the matter is there's no answer to that. Right? If you eat more cookies, but you eat less of something else, what terrible thing is going to happen? 5 cookies, 6 cookies, 7 cookies? There are no simple answers to this kind of thing. So if you're enforcing those kinds of restrictions, just pulling them out of thin air, then when the kid is set loose in the world, what they're going to pull out restrictions for themselves out of thin air based on what you told them? Why? Well, they don't understand why, because you don't even understand why. It's just a guess. It's just like basically latent generalized fear. So that's not a good reason. They're not going to have a good reason because you don't have a good reason. They're just going to be afraid of food and potentially have various hang-ups and guilt and anxiety, and I don't think any of that's good. All right. All right, what about making sure that your kids are healthy? Is it possible to let a kid eat whatever they want and have them grow up perfectly healthy, with frictionless relationships with food and with themselves, all while making no sacrifices in terms of your relationship with your kids? Yes, if you can be the helpful problem solver rather than the adversarial gatekeeper. If you can patch over rough spots by, say, supplementing nutritional deficiencies with multivitamin gummies, or figuring out a few, quote, healthy dishes that are made genuinely appealing. I'd rather try that than badger my kid about what they eat at every meal and snack opportunity, knowing full well that badgering might not even work. I don't know if that made a lot of sense the way I wrote it, but what about making sure your kids are healthy? Is it possible to let a kid eat whatever they want and have them still be healthy and not have any personal issues with you? And I'm saying yes, it's possible. Hunger. A common objection is that parents must manage their kids' hunger. Otherwise, life will be difficult for everyone. If kids just eat junk food, then they never get satiated and are always hungry and irritable. So that's very reasonable. That's, I would say, like kind of the main argument is that when they eat unfulfilling, unwholesome food, they tend to be quick bursts of energy, and then shortly thereafter they're hungry again, but they're doing whatever they're doing and they don't want to eat, and now they start getting irritable because when I'm hungry, I'm irritable, and hunger makes you irritable, and then you wind up fighting with them, and it's saying, you know what, if you did what I told you to do, which was finish your breakfast, then we wouldn't be fighting. You'd be better off, I'd be better off. Our relationship wouldn't be having this friction. So I think that's a very good reasonable argument to want to force somebody to eat. This perspective often hails the virtues of eating, quote, real food, which is vaguely defined as any food that is heartier, more traditional, more filling, and more nutritious than the admittedly tastier artificial foods on offer. So yeah, this real food, junk food distinction I have a big problem with, but let's just run with this for now. A major problem with this approach is that controlling a kid's food can cause irritability. Boom, it can backfire. Every single rule can backfire. So if you don't want an irritable kid, well, forcing them to do stuff can make them irritable. It can produce anxiety and moodiness, even for kids who, quote, eat well, right? There's plenty of kids that eat well and are still moody and anxiety-ridden and sullen and, right, all sorts of annoying, unpleasant personality traits. A key observation that drove me away from enforcing food rules was witnessing all of the strife generated by making kids, quote, eat right. It struck me as a losing strategy to battle with a toddler until they've eaten sufficient amounts of approved foods in a bid to avoid battles with irritable kids later on. Right? So you're going to battle with a kid now to make them eat the approved food so that you're not having a fight with them later on. You're guaranteeing a fight right now with the hope of possibly avoiding a fight in the future. That was like my light bulb moment. Why not let them eat what they like and see if a battle arises at all, right? Waiting for problems to show up rather than trying to forestall them. If no battle arises, it's a glorious win-win. They get to eat what they want and everyone does fine. Why not have, another suggestion is, why not have sufficient amounts of junk food always on hand so that kids can eat whenever they're hungry? That's what I'm saying. My son with the ice cream. Nice thing about the ice cream is, I never had to like make him finish his meal, finish his plate, because whenever he wanted to, right, whenever he gets hungry, even in the short term, he can go get himself some ice cream. Plus, ice cream is pretty filling, actually. If you're concerned with nutrition, why not search for If you're concerned with nutrition, why not search extra hard for natural foods that the kids like, or processed foods that are somewhat hearty? One solution we've found is chocolate bars and Nutella, both of which are appealing, they travel well, are easy for kids to manage themselves, and have enough fat to be relatively filling, especially when combined with other foods. We decided early on that we wouldn't fight with our kids about food in order to forestall fights with our kids about hunger. Instead, we deal with hunger and the corresponding possible irritability when it arises. I suspect that hunger is used as a rationalization for why kids are irritable and moody, when really they are chafing at rule enforcement in general. Anytime a kid gets defensive, it's easy to blame a lack of real food, or a lack of sleep, or too much screen time, etc., right? It's easy to say, though, I know the real reason why you're upset. I am guilty of doing this myself quite a bit, even though I'm aware of it. I know the real reason you're upset. It's because you're not eating the way I want you to eat. You're not using the screens the way I want you to use them. You're not, right? I heard a lot of this when I was a kid. It was very effective. I know you better than you know yourself, and you need to do my prescribed remedies. You need to adopt my prescribed remedies to not be such a pain in the butt. And it always made me want to be a real pain in the butt. I suspect that hunger is used as a rationalization for why kids are irritable and moody. Anytime a kid gets defensive, it's easy to blame lack of real food, real sleep. Food rules become a useful tool for control in terms of other rules. In general, parental force causes its own problems whose proposed solution is even more force. That's a little jumbled there, but food rules wind up being used to enforce other rules, right? No sweets. You can have a sweet if you do your homework, right? You can have a sweet if you eat your dinner. Yikes, yikes. Food rules are a classic, common tool of control, and like all tools of control, it can be fearful, it can be scary to let them go. You have a decisive advantage as a parent, but they are liabilities, and they should be let go of, and it's worth trying. I wanted to say one other thing about hunger. Sugar, the sugar high. I think the sugar high is nonsense. I don't think it's real, for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think kids eat sugary things often at certain events, like a birthday party. And maybe a kid is having a sugar high because it's very exciting to have a birthday party. And it's not the sugar, the cake that got them excited, it's all the other kids and whatnot. And if a kid gets moody in the presence of cake, perhaps they are upset because the birthday boy got a present and they didn't, right? And that's what they're actually moody about, and it's not about the sugar. The other strong argument I have, and there's research on this stuff, but quite frankly, this research is garbage. The other argument I have here is that a bagel will turn into the equivalent of sugar in your stomach within minutes of eating it. Bagel, pasta, rice, all simple carbohydrates turn into the equivalent of sugar. So, and I never hear about people declaring that their kids get a sugar high from bread or pasta or rice. And that's because, if you're a diabetic, you get a sugar spike after eating bread or pasta or rice, right? Then you gotta give yourself insulin after a carb load. It doesn't matter if that carb load is in the form of a donut or a bagel, the sugar spike afterward will be the same. It'll be just as sharp, right? The peak will be just as sharp. Whereas if you eat a salad, it's a slow, gradual peak that's much lower. Whereas a donut and a bagel look the same. So if kids aren't getting hyper when they eat processed carbohydrates, simple carbohydrates, I don't think they would get hyper from eating sugar. I think it's nonsense. I do think chocolate is one of the great foods for kids. Huge amount of calories, travels well, kids like it, so it's great for car rides, trips, picnics, or whatever, outside. Anytime you're around and a kid might get hungry, right? They didn't really eat breakfast, they didn't eat their eggs like you wanted them to. If you bring chocolate bars, it can solve a lot of those problems. All right, this was fun. I'm not even through food yet. One of my favorite chapters. I'm glad I started with this one. It starts things off with a bang. I'm sure I lost a bunch of readers, but anybody who was freaked out about that chapter wasn't gonna properly embrace this book anyway. All right, see you next time.